Drawing Buzz Lightyear is easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it, no matter your skill level. Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos, and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools, and let's get started. Just a quick note before we start, in this video I'm going to be drawing in Procreate, an app on the iPad Pro, but you can follow along with pretty much any software of your choice. Even pencil and paper could work here, because I'm not going to be using any fancy feature from the app. We're really just going to focus on doing a character breakdown of this guy right here, so Buzz Lightyear. That being said, if you are working with Procreate and you want to have my illustration as a reference right here, the way to do it is going in the wrench icon menu, in the canvas submenu, picking the reference toggle, activating that, and that's going to let you import an image. So if you want to download my illustration along with the color palette that we're going to use in this video, they will both be linked in the description below, and they're completely free. That being said, they're not essential. Of course, you could just use the video as your reference, and I'm also going to add a hex code for the colors in the top corner of the video right here once we do use colors. That being said, we're going to start with a super rough sketch, and we're not going to see this rough sketch in the final result, so the color you use really doesn't matter. I personally like to sketch with a neutral gray. And in this video, I'm going to give you a few different suggestions for the brushes. I'm going to suggest free brushes that come with Procreate and can totally allow you to follow along, because again, this is really not so much about a specific illustration technique as much as understanding how to draw this character. So free Procreate brushes. I'm also going to give you tips on finding brushes that could work if you're working with a different kind of software. And I'm also going to suggest brushes from my Ultimate Illustration bundle. Now, these brushes are not essential. Don't worry, you don't have to buy anything to follow along. This is really not the point. But they can help you save time and maybe get more professional results because they're super sensitive to the Apple Pencil, and they also have a lot of textures within them. So if you want to check them out, there are links in the description below, and there's always a special promo code for the YouTube people. But again, don't worry, it's really not essential, especially not for a character breakdown like this. Now again, we're going to start with a rough sketch, so you can really pick any brush you know you're comfortable with. If you're working with Procreate's free brushes, you could go, for example, in the sketching pack and pick the HB pencil. If you're working in a different software, anything that has pencil in the name could probably work really well. And if you do have my illustration bundle, you could pick the sketching brush, of course. So go ahead and start by creating a new layer and renaming this layer to Sketch. I'm not gonna lie to you, drawing Buzz Lightyear is not necessarily difficult, but there is a lot of different elements that we need to map out first. So the first part of this video, the first chapter, is going to be, like I said, doing a rough sketch. And for that, we're going to break down the character here in the most basic shapes and form possible. And if you're not necessarily used to doing that, you're probably going to feel a bit discouraged at one point because it's going to look really crazy and it might take a little bit of time. But don't worry, trust the process, trust me, we're going to map out everything, and once we have a rough sketch, the rest of the video is going to go by pretty quickly and it's going to be fairly easy. So bear with me here, we're going to start with a rough sketch again. It's gonna look messy, but that's totally okay. So here we're just going to start by mapping out the top of the spacesuit, and for that we're just going to draw a big box. So we can start with just a rectangle, and then you can draw lines on the side to show the thickness, and connect those lines to finish your box. And this is what I meant when I said we're going to do a super rough sketch first. You can see if your lines are messy, it's totally okay. Don't worry about trying to make this look perfect. It's really not important at all at this stage. So once you have your box, we're actually going to map out the middle of the box by drawing a vertical line. But as we can see in the example, our character is slightly angled this way. It's not straightforward, it's slightly an angle. So the vertical line, we're going to put it slightly to the left, and we're going to carry that line on the top part of the box like this. Now we're also going to divide the top in two halves. And then with that, we're easily going to be able to place the head. So for the head, we're just going to draw two circles that are roughly the same size, and you're just going to place the circles along the center lines. From there, we're going to add the shoulders, and those are going to be pretty much the same size as the circle we used for the head. So you could just go ahead and map those out right here. So next we're going to map out the part between the torso and the legs, which in the new movie that came out yesterday is actually the abs, but in the old or original version is more like a tube. So we're just going to draw the tube version. It's a little bit less creepy, I think. So just go ahead and draw, I guess, the bottom part of the cylinder. From there we can map out the pelvis plate, I guess, and then the top of the leg. So this kind of shape right here, I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but it's not super complicated. And then the legs, just 2 half ovals on each side. Great, so we're almost done with the base structure. I know it looks crazy, but that's okay. We just need to quickly sketch the arms, and then we're going to start refining the shapes to actually make that look like Buzz Lightyear. Now the arms might look like they're a bit complicated, but really it's not that bad at all. We're going to draw the top segment of the arm right below the shoulder by just adding this kind of U shape right here, doing that on both sides. And then for the elbow, it's going to be another circle, but this one is quite a bit smaller than the top shoulder one. Kind of like this, again doing it on both sides. And just adding another U shape for the forearm. And this one you might want to angle it a little bit so it's not just straight, kind of like this. And for now, we're just going to add a triangle shape for the hand, but we're going to define them a bit better later. So now that we have the skeleton of the character, it's pretty easy to go around and just change the proportions of certain things that might not look right already. So if you're working in a digital art software, the way to do it is to find or use any selection tool that you have in Procreate. It's right here, and setting it to freehand or freeform depending on what vocabulary is used in your software, and then drawing a selection around any body part that you might want to move. For example, I feel like this arm might be a little bit too high, so I'm just going to draw a selection around the arm, and then with the arrow tool I can just move it around, place it where I want it to be. I can also resize it if I felt like it was too small. So essentially, because we're working with super basic shape, quite easy to draw them really quickly, and then go back in and using selection tool, adjust the structure so that we have a really good base to then go back in and start refining the sketch. So feel free to pause the video here to take all the time you might need to just play with the different elements and play with the proportions until you're happy with your base structure. And then we're going to meet up in the next step, which is going to be adding more details to our sketch. Great, so now we have the base, but we cannot exactly say that it looks like Buzz Lightyear. So before we move on to adding the colors and doing the line art, we're going to start sketching the different elements in a little bit more details. Now there are a few different ways you could approach that. You could go and use an eraser, especially if you're working with pencil and paper, and lightly erase your rough sketch so that it's a little bit lighter. And then with your pencil, you can go back over and start kind of refining those shapes. If you're working with Procreate or a different software, you could essentially just go ahead and either lower the opacity of your sketch and then work on a new layer, or just straight up go in with a slightly darker version of the base color you started working with. So this is what I'm personally going to do. I'm just going to use a slightly darker gray. And with that, we're just going to go over all the different shapes and start building the actual spacesuit that our character is wearing, instead of just having this boring box with a bunch of circles. So we're going to start with the actual suit. So just zooming in on the torso area. So we're going to start here by just refining the shape of the box itself by adding a bit of a divot at the bottom like this. So kind of a rounded W shape like that. We're also going to add this kind of plate on top, which pokes out a little bit. So we're just going to add a bit of thickness on the side like this. And then we're going to bring this up towards the top. Now the plate also ends in sort of a rounded W, but a little bit more pointy than the one at the bottom. So we're just going to sketch that out real quick, and it's going to be pretty easy because we already have this vertical line to help us place the middle. And as you can see here, we're still in a sketching phase, so we don't need to have clean lines. So it's okay if it still looks messy. You still shouldn't necessarily be using your eraser, either undo or just draw a bunch of different lines until you find something that roughly resembles what you want to have in the end. And then I kind of went ahead of myself here, but you can just extend the W shape to finish up the plate. It's going to end up slightly above the shoulder. Then as you can see here, the opening at the top of this spacesuit is more round than square because usually there is kind of the glass thing that covers its head. So we're going to refine that shape as well. Instead of it being a straight line, it's going to be more of a U shape. And from there we can just thicken that line up a little bit to add a metal rim. So we're just going to keep going on by refining the details on the plate. And for that, we're going to add this kind of medallion in the front, which has a logo. So it's going to be this pretty standard shape right here. And then we're just going to frame it with the plate. Nothing too fancy here. We're also going to add 3 thin rounded rectangles on the left side of the plate, as well as a big circle on the right side, which has this kind of rounded triangle shape below it. And finally, the nameplate on the top right. Moving on from the plate, we also have these 2 purple details. I'm not exactly sure what they would be, but we're going to draw them because they're quite characteristic. So on the right side, you can align it essentially with your circle right here. So you could kind of draw it. It's kind of like that. And then on the left side, it's just going to be 1 line because again, our character is at an angle. Now before moving on to the arms, we're just going to draw the rest of the torso and then the legs. So we're going to go with the toy version, which is just going to be 4 rings. So you can start by drawing the one in the middle and just dividing the 2 sections to create the rings. Now for the pelvis area, we're going to use a shape that is very similar to this kind of medallion thing at the top, but just a little bit shorter. So we're going to draw kind of a V shape here, and then connect that with the rings. And from there we're going to draw, I have no idea how to describe this shape, so make sure you look at the video. But this kind of thing right here on both sides. And then just finish by adding essentially a belt around the top. From there we can actually refine the shape of the pelvis. So on the left side it's going to be way less curvy than what I have right now, kind of like that. And on the right side maybe less curvy as well, because right now it looks like our character has a big butt, and that's not really that's not really what we want. And then for the legs, pretty easy. You're just gonna go over the lines that you already have, maybe adding another line to kind of show that it's a bunch of different pieces. So same thing on the right, just adding another line right here. So nothing too crazy for the legs. Okay, so we've done probably the hardest part. Now we're just going to refine the arms and then add the head and the top of the suit. Now the arms are pretty simple. Again, I know they might seem a bit crazy if you just look at the example, but all you have to do is the top circle, that shoulder bit, just draw over the circle you already had as is and divide it into with a horizontal line like this. And in the bottom section, just add a circle. I guess it would be kind of a screw hole or something like that. Then we're going to forget the top of the arm and move on straight to the elbow circle. So again, just drawing that as is. And this time it's going to be split in 2, but with a vertical line. But it's also going to have this kind of screw hole on the side. And then all we have to do really is draw a U shape above the elbow. And then connect that with the shoulder on both sides. We're also going to add another U shape on the right side of this arm piece, just like this, and that's pretty much it. Now the forearm is also going to be pretty simple. We're just going to draw a U shape, but instead of connecting it with the elbow sphere on both sides, we're going to draw out the outside a little bit and then bring it in kind of that way. Then we can just draw a line to show where the green ends and when the cream color starts. And then we can also add a bit of a U shape here to show that there's a divot for the elbow to move in. So not too bad. Now we're going to do it on the other side, but the other side is much easier because it's almost all hidden. So same thing, we're going to start with the shoulder, just drawing over what we have, and then dividing it in 2. Then moving on straight to the elbow. Again, dividing it, but this time vertically. Here for the top of the arm, we're just going to draw one straight line, nothing more crazy than that. And the forearm is also going to be kind of a U shape above what we already had. And this time we're going to draw a big U shape on this side, because if you think about it, this arm would be folding, I don't know if I can get my arm, yes, okay, great. This arm would be folding like this. So the ball joint of the toy would need some space to go into the arm. So we're just going to draw this hole right here. Now for the hand, we're pretty much just going to show that it exists. So we're just going to add kind of a rectangle here, which would be the top of the fingers like this. And then 2 ovals for the thumb. That's it. Not more complicated than that. Oh, and I almost forgot, we're going to draw a line here to show the green and then the cream. Okay, we're almost done with the sketch. I know this is intense, but bear with me. Once we're done with the sketch, essentially it's like we're going to be working with a coloring book, so everything else is going to be much easier. So if you made it this far, I know you can make it to the end. All we have to do now is add the head and complete the top of the suit. So we're going to zoom in a little bit, and we're really lucky because the head of this character is quite easy to draw. Essentially, it's like all the facial features are going to be in this top circle, and then it's just a super big chin, which is this bottom circle. We're just going to start by connecting the circles. And then we're going to split the top one with a slightly curved vertical line and a slightly curved horizontal line, which is what I usually call drawing the plus sign, and that plus sign is going to help us place the facial features. Now the character does have pretty intense cheekbones, so we're going to map those out as well. And the way to do it is pretty simple. You're just going to see where your horizontal line connects with the side of the circle, and from there you're just going to add a bit of a C-curve towards the middle of the face. And then from there you can add, I was going to say the hairline, but it's not really hair, it's the purple, I have no idea what that would be called, but this kind of purple fabric, so you could just draw a rounded M shape. And then we're going to add the little ear protectors, which are going to pretty much fall in the curves that we just made for the cheekbones. So you can draw those, they're pretty much just kind of D shapes on either sides. And last but not least, we're going to finish up the head by drawing, well, the top of the head. And we're going to drag that down to create the neck as well. And here I said we're drawing Buzz Lightyear, but you could really draw any kind of facial features you want. You could also draw yourself if that's something you're interested in. But essentially the idea here is going to be drawing 2 really big eyes that align with the horizontal line that we drew on the top circle. And then aligning with the vertical line and reaching the top of the bottom circle, you're going to draw a big nose like that. And then somewhere between the end of the nose and the end of the top circle, you're going to draw a smile. And then towards the bottom part of the lower circle, you're going to draw a little spiral for the chin. For now, we're going to leave the eyes blank, but we are going to draw the eyebrows. And the eyebrows are kind of weird. They're straight at the top, pretty thick, and then they just curve around the eyes on the side. Okay, and then last but not least, we're going to finish up the top of the suit. So we're going to start by drawing the green part that is inside, and for that we're going to start roughly aligning with the medallion part, and then just connecting that with the neck. Then we're going to mimic this curve to show the purpled part around the neck, kind of like this. And then we're going to kind of follow this line and add it on the other side, just to finish the shape. We're also going to draw the circle that is the mechanism that allows the glass part to fold over the head. So it's going to be one oval like this, then a horizontal line at the top of the oval, a bigger oval on the outside, another one that you're going to connect just to create a thick part, and then just kind of a tiny curve button kind of thing. Now the other side is going to be the almost same thing, but before that we might want to refine the rim a little bit. So we're just going to make it stop just a little bit above the neck part. And same thing with the plate. We're also going to make it stop pretty much in the middle of the shoulder piece. And from there we're just going to do the opposite of what we drew on the left side. So this oval part is going to be inside like this. Then we're going to have one bigger oval, another bigger oval. We're going to connect them to create a thick piece. And then on this side, we're going to see the button really well. So circle, circle, connect the circle to have a button. And then we just have to close up the back, so just drawing a line. Thicken that up. And then add kind of just a weird rectangle thing. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's part of the mechanism, I guess, but just kind of this rectangle like that. Great, so now that we have the rough sketch, essentially we're just going to go over all the crazy lines, pick the one that we want to use, and trace them. Now there are a few different ways to do that. If you're working with pencil and paper, you could go back in with your eraser again and just lightly erase everything and then trace the line well. You could also just pick a new piece of paper, put it on top of your sketch, and then trace through the paper. So that's two different ways you could do it, again, with pencil and paper. If you're working digitally though, it's going to be really easy. We're just going to lower the opacity of our sketch. And I'm going to keep it quite opaque so you can still see it in my video, but in your case, lower the opacity until the point right before your sketch just completely disappears. Then having done that, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to rename this new layer to line art. Now, I personally like to have my line art be darker versions of the different colors in the illustration, but because we haven't painted the colors yet, it's a little bit hard to know which colors to use for the line art. So for now, we're just going to pick one color that is quite different from the one that we use for the sketch. So if you're using the color palette, let's all go with this dark green right here. If you're picking your own colors, you can just pick, again, anything that is different from your sketch. And later in the video, I'm going to show you how to recolor your outlines. So honestly, the color here doesn't matter. You just want to make sure that it's quite different from the sketch. And in terms of brushes here, you have a few different options. If you're working with free brushes that come with Procreate, I recommend still in the sketching pack using the 6B pencil. If you're not a fan of texture, you could go in the inking pack and pick something like the Studio Pen that would give you really smooth outlines. That being said, I usually like to have some texture in my outlines, so I would suggest the 6B pencil. If you're working in a different software, again, something that has pencil in the name is probably going to be totally a-okay. But if you are working with the brushes from my illustration bundle, you could pick the outlines brush. And here there's really no right or wrong way to do this, but the goal is to just go over all the crazy lines that you have, pick which one you actually want to use, and draw over it. Now the size you use for your brush here is going to depend on many factors, like which brush you're using, the canvas size you're working with, along with just your personal preference in terms of line art. So what I recommend here is just try a few brush sizes before starting to trace, and once you find one that seems good, just go with that. Really, it's that simple. And I said there is no right or wrong way to do this, but I do have an advice for you. Whenever you're trying to do line art, try to avoid erasing. And what I mean by that is if you draw a line, especially a curve, that's usually where that happens, that you're not super happy with, instead of going in with your eraser and erasing, for example, the front section here, and then trying to draw your curve again, just undo and redraw the whole thing until you're happy with that whole curve. And there are a few reasons for that. Believe it or not, when you do get used to doing it that way, you're going to save a lot of time. The first few illustrations you do without your eraser, it's probably going to be a little bit more time consuming just because you're not used to it. But over time, it's going to be much quicker. But the main reason I would really encourage you to do it that way is that your lines are going to flow much better, and your illustration in general is just going to look really well connected, and the curves are just going to flow into each other that way. Other than that though, there is again no right or wrong way, so I'm just going to stop talking here to let you focus on drawing your line art, but I'm going to keep my video going in the background if you want to use it as a reference. Otherwise, we're all going to meet up in the next step. Once we have the line art complete, we're going to start adding the colors. Great, so now that we have the line art, we can go ahead and hide the sketch. And then we're going to quickly do the background before we start adding the colors, because there's a lot of kind of cream gray, so if we don't do the background first, we're just not going to see the character really well. In the background, you can really have whatever you want. Here, I'm just going to go a super dark blue. So if you're working with Procreate, you can just set your background color layer to a dark blue. Otherwise, if you're working in different software, just create a new layer, put it below everything, and rename it to background. And if you're working with the color palette, we're going to use this dark blue right here. You can probably barely see it in the video, but you're going to see it in the color palette. As you can see, it's pretty much middle of the way in terms of saturation, but it's really super, super dark. Now, if you want, you could stop here, but I think it might be a good idea to add a bit of a gradient. So we're just going to create a new layer, put it below everything, renaming it to gradient. And here we're going to pick a lighter blue, so in the color palette I'm going to use this one right here. As you can see, it's pretty much middle of the way in terms of both the saturation and the brightness. And we're just going to draw a circle on the top left corner, and then we're going to fill in that shape. Now, most digital art software are going to have some blurring feature, and a lot of them are going to have what is called Gaussian blur. And we're going to use that to create more of a gradient with our shape. So if you're working in Procreate, it is going to be in the adjustment panel here at the top. And you can see Gaussian blur right here. And you can just swipe your finger towards the right to add more blur, and towards the left to decrease the blur. So the amount here is really going to depend on what you want. I want to make sure mine is really, really soft, so I'm probably going to put it at 100% to be honest. And just so that the background is extra fun, we can also add some stars. So just creating a new layer, renaming this new layer to stars. And here we're going to just pick a lighter version of the blue we used for the highlight. Now, I don't have it in color palette because it really doesn't need to be super precise. Just manually make it a little bit lighter. And then with the same brush you use for your line art, you're just going to add a few dots, focusing mostly in the lighter area of the sky. Great, so now that we have a background, we're going to start mapping out the colors for a character, and for that we're going to start with just a super simple, solid color silhouette of the entire character. So go ahead and create a new layer, make sure that it is above your background but below your line art and your sketch, and rename it to colors. And for the silhouette, we're going to use the kind of beige gray. Now in the color palette it is right here. Otherwise, as you can see, it's super, super light and really super desaturated. It's almost gray, but it does have a little bit of orange brown in it, just so it pops a little bit more than, yeah, a boring neutral gray. And here we want to have a solid silhouette without any texture to it. So if you're using free brushes that come with Procreate, for that you would go in the airbrushing pack, picking the hard brush and making sure that the opacity of your brush is 100%. If you're working in a different software, the hard brush is pretty much just the most basic brush you can find in your software, so a circle brush without any texture, without any gradient, without anything. That's what you want. But if you're working with the illustration bundle, you could pick the based round brush here. And the goal here is just going to be outlining your character and then fill in the outline to create the silhouette. And with that, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this final video, please go ahead and leave a comment with the words Toy Story. If you're new on the channel, you might be a little bit confused with what is the secret password thing. Essentially, it's a game that we play. In every single illustration video, I hide a secret password for you to find. And it does a few things. One of them is, well, it's just really cool because you know me, you see my face in the intro, you hear my voice throughout the entire video, but I have no idea who you are. And whenever you leave a comment, no matter what the comment is, I get to sometimes see your name, sometimes see your face, and it's just so great to see who's part of the creative community that we're building here on this channel. And the other reason is that the secret password does give me a lot of information into how to edit and paste my videos better, which helps me create better tutorials for you guys, so that is super important. So make sure to go ahead and leave a comment with the words Toy Story, and then we're going to keep going. And then once you have your silhouette, all we're going to do is map out the different color sections on separate layers. Now, if you're working in a digital art software, there's a little hack that we can use to make that even easier. So we're going to start by mapping out, what are we going to do? Let's go with the green because it's quite vibrant. So we're just going to create a new layer above the color layer, but still below the line art and the sketch. And we're going to rename this layer to green. Now we're going to apply the green layer as what is called a clipping mask. So to do that, if you're working in Procreate, you can just tap on the layer and in the layer menu select clipping mask, and you're going to see a little arrow pointing down to the color. And essentially, a clipping mask, what it does is now everything we draw on the green layer is going to stay within the silhouette that we already have, which means we don't have to be as precise when we create the shapes. We can kind of go over the lines and it won't matter as much. Now, clipping masks are not really a super fancy feature, meaning a lot of software do have them. If you don't know where yours are, you can just Google the name of your software with clipping mask and you should get an answer pretty quickly. And if you don't have clipping mask in your software, don't worry, it's really not a big deal. You're just going to need to be a little bit more precise when you add the other colors. Now we're going to stick with the same brush, but we're going to pick a nice vibrant green. In the color palette, it's this one right here, but otherwise you can see it's pretty much middle of the way between yellow and aqua. And it's really quite bright and pretty much in the middle in terms of the saturation. So all we have to do is outline the different sections that are going to be green and then fill them in to start blocking in the different colors. So feel free to pause the video here to take all the time you need to color block the different green areas, and once you have that, we're going to move on to the dark gray sections. So the dark gray section is going to be the exact same technique. We're just going to create a new layer. We're going to rename the layer to dark gray. And we're also going to apply it as a clipping mask so it stays within the base color shape. And the dark gray we're going to use in the color palette is right here. As you can see, I call it dark gray, but there is a little bit of yellow orange in it, again, just so it's not totally neutral. It's always a good idea to try avoiding completely desaturated neutrals. Your illustrations are just going to look so much more alive if you do that. So same thing, we're just going to go over and color block the different dark gray areas, mostly the belly and then the top of the shoulders. Now we're going to do the same thing with the light gray, so just a new layer, renaming it to light gray, applying it as a clipping mask as well. And then the color palette is going to be this gray right here, so just below the dark one we just used. And again, you can see there's a little bit of color within it, it's not just pure gray. Next, we're going to move on to the very classic Buzz Lightyear purple. Same thing again, just creating a new layer, renaming it to purple, applying it as a clipping mask, and then picking this purple from the color palette. You can see it's quite red, honestly, and it's pretty dark, and again, middle of the way in terms of saturation. Once you have your purple, we're going to draw the face. So a new layer, renaming this one to skin, I guess. Once more applying it as a clipping mask. And in the color palette, we're going to use this kind of beige right here. You can see it's almost like an orange, pretty light and also fairly desaturated. And we're drawing all the colors on separate layers so that if we make a mistake, for example, if I colored the purple over, I don't know, the green or something, I could just go back in on the purple layer and correct my mistake without having to go back and then paint the green, paint the cream, paint all the different colors. So whenever you're creating an illustration, it's always a good idea to color block your main colors on separate layers, except for stuff like the details we have on the plate here. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to create, I guess, like 4, 5 different layers. So once we have the main color blocking done, we're just going to create a new layer above all the basic color blocks, and we're going to rename this new layer to detail or extra color, something like that. We're also going to apply it as a clipping mask, but on that layer we're going to draw all these other elements. So we're going to start with the blue medallion right here. In the color palette, it's this blue here. You can see pretty dark and quite saturated this time. So same thing, you're just going to outline the shape and then fill it in. And you're also going to fill in the rounded rectangle that is on the far left. Next, we're going to pick this red right here, which as you can see is pretty much melted away in terms of brightness, but is super saturated. And with that, we're going to draw the red button on the right side, as well as the rounded rectangle on the far right. Then we're going to go in with a dark kind of foresty green, and the color palette is the one between the red and the blue. Once more, you can see quite saturated, fairly dark, and we're going to use that green just to fill in the middle rounded rectangle. For the nameplate, we're going to pick this yellow right here. As you can see, this one is super bright and again pretty much melted away in terms of saturation. And finally, we're going to add all the facial features, starting with the eyebrows. And the eyebrows, we're going to pick the color right next to the skin. As you can see, again, it's some sort of an orange, pretty much in the middle in terms of both light and saturation. And we're also going to finally draw the eyes, so we're going to pick the same cream color we used for the suit. And then for the pupil, we're going to use the same dark gray that we used on the shoulders, and the color palette, again, it's this one right here. And if you really want to bring your character to life, we could also add some extra highlights in the eyes. So for that, you could just pick pure white and then adding 2 dots in the pupils. Great, so before we start shading and adding highlights, which by the way, I'm going to keep it very simple. I know this video is super long already. But before we do that, we're quickly going to recolor your outlines. Now, if you're working in a digital art software, there is a trick that you can use, and that is to activate what is called Alpha Lock on your line art layer. If you're working in Procreate, the way to activate Alpha Lock is just using 2 fingers and then swiping your layer towards the right. You can also manually activate Alpha Lock within the menu, just selecting it here. And what Alpha Lock does is now everything we draw on the line art layer is going to stay within the line art that we're already there, which means we can just pick a color and brush over a section to recolor that section. If you don't have Alpha Lock in your software, well, it's really not the end of the world. You could just create a new layer above the line art, rename that new layer to Line Art Color, and then apply that layer as a clipping mask on the line art layer. It's not optimal because that means you have 2 layers for your line art, but honestly, it's really not the end of the world. And if you don't have clipping masks in your software, again, not the end of the world. You can just go over your lines and recolor them manually. Again, you just have to be a little bit more careful, but it's definitely something that you can still do. And here you can really have any color outlines you want. You could have a line art that is fully black, that's totally an option. But like I was saying, I personally just like to have darker versions of the different color in my piece. So you can just go over, color pick different colors and make them darker, and just brush over the line arts of those elements. Now, a quick explanation about the color palette I'm providing. If you look at the color palette, you can see that next to a row of base color, to the right of it, there is another row with slightly darker versions of the same colors. So these are the colors I'm going to be using for the line art. But honestly, it's kind of pointless here trying to pick the exact color I'm using. What I would recommend, which is going to be much quicker, is just color picking the different base colors, making them darker, and then just going with that. So once more here, I'm going to stop talking to let you recolor your outlines. It should take maybe a minute or 2. And once you're done with that, we're going to meet in the next step, which is going to be adding some shadows and lights. And last but not least, we're going to add some very simple shadows to our character just to make it look a little bit less flat. But we're not going to go into all the shading theory because, again, this video is already a lot. So just go ahead and create a new layer above all your color blocking layers, but below your line art. Rename this layer to Shadows. Apply it as a clipping mask as well if it's available to you. Otherwise, again, you're just going to have to be a bit more precise when you paint your shadows. And here you could totally go in, just color pick the different colors you have in your piece, make them slightly darker and paint your shadows that way. That could work, but a quicker, more efficient way to do it is use what is called blending mode. And blending modes are in pretty much every single software I've ever seen, and usually they're with the opacity settings. So in Procreate, if you just tap on the N next to the check mark, you're going to see the opacity, but also the list of blending modes. And here we're going to use linear burn, and we're going to, lower the opacity of our layer for now around 50%, just so it's not too intense. And by using blending modes, it means we can pick one color, paint all of the shadows with that one color, and the color is going to adapt to whatever is under, which means we're going to get a darker green, a darker gray, just by using the same color. For your shadows, you can use pretty much any color you want. I would just recommend trying to stay away from neutral grays because then your shadows are going to look super muddy. I usually paint my shadows with a grayish purple, so in the color palette it would be this one right here. Now here in terms of brushes, you have a few options as usual. If you're working with free Procreate brushes, you could go in the charcoal pack and pick the Willow Charcoal. If you're working with a different software, anything that has charcoal in the name could work really well. Otherwise, you could just go with a regular basic soft brush. If you do have my illustration bundle though, I recommend you pick the basic texture brush. Now again, we're going to keep the shadows really super simple here. So we pretty much already have the light source mapped out because we have this part of the background that is already lighter, so that means the light is somewhere, here. So we're just going to paint shadows on the left side of the character whenever we have different elements. On the right side of those elements, we're going to paint a shadow. For example, just a quick shadow on the right side of the body like this. On the hips, on the leg. Really, you can see it's super simple. I'm going to do the same thing on the arm. You get the point. So just go over the entire character and add shadows on the right side of all the different elements you have. If you want, you could also add a bit of a shadow in the eye, but this time it would be on the left side, which I know is a bit confusing because it would be from the eyelashes casting a shadow in the eye, so. Great! Now once you're done mapping out your shadows, it might look a little bit too intense, so feel free to go back and play with the opacity of your shadow layer. I'm probably going to set mine around 30%. Then we're also going to add some lights really super quickly just to make the piece pop. So go ahead and create a new layer above your shadows, rename it to lights. Apply it as a clipping mask once more, and here we're going to use a blending mode again, but this time we're going to go with add. Now add is super strong, so go ahead and lower your opacity already probably around 20%. And for the lights you can also pick any color of your choice. I usually go with a super bright yellow, and the color palette it's this one right here. And then with a pretty small brush, all we're going to do is we're going to outline the line art that is facing towards the light source. So for example, if I zoom in on this shoulder here, this line is facing the light source, so I'm just going to add a bit of light there. So you can see it takes like half of a second, but already this piece pops so much more. So we're just going to go over the character, and whenever there's a line that is facing the light source, we're just going to outline it with light. And since our character is made of plastic, we might also want to add some extra shine on some areas. I like to add it on the cheeks usually, especially here again because plastic. But otherwise you can go over some elements and just add a few extra little dots or a few extra little lines. And just like for the shadows, you can always go back and just play with the opacity of your lights layer. I think I want mine to be a little bit more intense, so I'm just going to increase the opacity, maybe around 30% as well. And the very last thing we're going to do is just add a bit of color variation on the whole character to help it just not blend with the background, because we don't want it to blend, but just help it work better with the background. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to put that new layer below the lights and the shadows. It should be applied automatically as a clipping mask. If not, just go ahead and activate clipping mask. And we're going to rename this layer to extra color. For now, we're going to lower the opacity probably around 50%, and with the same brush, but this time much bigger, we're just going to pick the blue that we used for the highlight in the background. So in the color palette, it was this one right here. And then we're just going to gently brush over the top left of our character so that, yeah, it looks like this blue light is also on the character. Now, I forgot, very important, we need to apply this layer as a clipping mask as well, because right now this looks crazy. So we're going to set the extra color layer to the blending mode, I think. Color dodge it was? Yeah. So color dodge, and then yes, you can just brush over very gently the top left side of your character. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn how to draw more of your favorite characters, I highly recommend you check out this playlist because I have a bunch more character breakdowns for you. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the weekly videos. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.